Hello and welcome to the DIF, the Disruptive Innovation Festival. This is day 4 of our 3-week online festival that asks the question, what if we could redesign everything? I am very excited to introduce in this session to Galit Goldfarb from Israel. Galit has 22 years experience as a nutritionist, as a clinical nutritionist and scientist, especially in the food and diet and lifestyle program. And we will have an open discussion or conversation about a couple of questions, crucial questions for what will happen with feeding 10 billion people in the future. And Galit really knows how food choices affect every aspect of our being, not just individually, but what the bigger impact could be and can be on for our future. So Galit, great to have you here. Thanks very much for joining us for the DIF.
Thank you for having me.
And I'm really intrigued by this topic to see, as we discussed it before and as we connected, that what could be, the global approach to food and dietary choice, and what education can do in this space, or what is necessarily to be done.
Yeah, well, that's a great question because, first of all, it's good to understand whether it's really necessary to redesign the global approach to food and diet choices. I sent you a slide.
Yeah.
You can actually put it up because let's look at some statistics. Research shows that the human population is growing at a rate of 360,000 births every day. And there are only 180,000 deaths per day. So the population is growing. It's predicted to reach 8.5 billion people by 2030 and 9.7 billion by 2050. And then go up to reach 10.5 billion people by 2060. And with our current food choices, how we're eating today, the growing population, we're going to need to grow 70% more food than we are growing now. So we will need to grow more food. And the statistics also show that through our current patterns of behavior, how we're living, we're going to be it's also leading to 17% less productivity from our land. We're causing land degradation. So even the amount of land that we do have available to grow our food is degrading. And in the last 40 years, we lost about 1/3 of our arable land due to land degradation, and it's happening because of poor resource management. We're growing a lot of meat for consumption and biofuel, and this is also now only 55% of the world's crops are nourishing actually people. About 100 calories of grain, which is fed to animals, we only get about 40 calories if we're drinking milk from a cow, 22 calories if we're eating an egg, 12 calories if we're eating a chicken, and only 3 calories of that 100-calorie grain, we eat it back as beef. So all of these, and also unsustainable farming practices are leading to land degradation, excessive use of fertilizers and pesticides. So we need to change our habitual behaviors as well as grow more food. And we also have about 820 million starving people on the planet. And that's 1 in 8 people are undernourished. And 46% of children are underweight. And on the other hand, we have 1.9 billion people that are overweight. And 600,000 people are obese. So also we have the whole issue of distribution. How can we distribute this food to people equally if we want to feed all people in this growing population? And also we want to feed them healthily. So we have another shocking statistic, I think, and that's that 95% of the global population is living in suboptimal health conditions. Just 1 in 20 people actually has no health problems, which is and most
1 out of 1 out of 20.
20, yeah, that's 4.3% of the population has no health problems. 1/3 of our population has more than 5 health issues at once. So we need to change our dietary habits as well. So we have all of these issues if we want to feed the world population. So we definitely need to redesign our global approach to food and dietary habits, and we should start to do this immediately.
And should we do it with you know, children or sort of teenagers, or how can we implement that from scratch? I remember I wouldn't have learned much about this when I was younger.
Exactly. Yes, so definitely compulsory sustainable environmental education in schools is a must. The children of they need to know what's really happening. The problem is that we have global warming on one side, which is causing loss of land, and people will have to migrate out of where they're living to be able to grow and have enough food. And on the other hand, we have this population growth, so we're going to have more people to feed. So we need to care for global warming to make sure that we don't go over now we've set for ourselves another 2-degree limit. We have to make sure that we don't go over that, so we can have the possibility to feed all these people, and that we don't have the destruction. And so many people will die, and we'll see a massive immigration, climate immigrations happening, and refugees from climate. So definitely we need education. We need places to get the information about which food is sustainable, which food is not. And my website shows a little bit of information, but education is still not enough.
Yeah.
Because
it's mostly about consciousness as well. Is that something you would say it could create a wider impact? Yeah. If, I mean, we can't have everyone go vegetarian, or I guess it's very unlikely. You probably see the same. So there might be solutions to this. I mean, I'm sometimes a bit startled when you think about lab-grown meats or the like. You know, we need to try to stay natural. I think this is something that you advocate as well. That we can't go over industrialized on our foods. So while some may need meat or still want to eat meat or still have their own choices, how can a conscious approach to dietary choice or to meat have a wider impact on the economy?
Okay, first of all, I want to say that most of our food choices are actually done unconsciously, without paying much attention to what we're eating, why we're eating it, or anything. We're doing these choices mostly out of habit. And we make about 200 food decisions a day, research shows, and all of this is done through habit. We may go to a supermarket, and mostly we buy all of our food through habit and maybe some impulse here, but none of it is really done consciously. So once we start educating children and people, then of course this will change. Also, there are what's called nudges, so people can have, like, instead of they go into a fast food restaurant, so instead of having fries as a side dish, they'd have salad, or having eye-level foods in supermarkets and have them more accessible. But still, the most important thing is price, because people are buying food according to their prices. And 40% of the United States population is below poverty line. And most of these people live in places where they don't even have access to healthy foods. So they're what's called food deserts, where they have one convenience store. They don't have access to too much public transportation. They don't own a car, and then they have to buy what's local. And what's local in these places is these shops can't buy in bulk. They don't have much buying power. So they bring in foods that can last for a long time, lots of food storage, processed foods that can last for a long time. So they put them in the back room there of the convenience store, and that's what they sell, because that's what people are also buying. They're also the cheapest foods. Now, we can give incentives to full service supermarkets to open in these areas, while this will provide more variety for people. And also, on the other hand, have fast food free zones where these fast food restaurants won't be able to open in neighborhoods. And then these supermarkets will also be able to sell more food. But then we have this also the SNAP program in the United States, these food stamps, which is a wonderful program. It also stimulates an economic activity while when there's an economic downturn. But the problem with these, it's a wonderful program, but there's one drawback, and that's the foods that they can buy. They can actually buy any type of foods that they want, and that includes candy, soft drinks, cookies, cakes, and all these bakery goods, as well as meat and dairy products, which is okay. But I think that if you're giving these food stamps to populations, you also want to make them healthier. You don't want to have it then come back through the back door and get in through the healthcare that we're having to pay through taxes. So that's definitely something that will need a little bit of changing, I think. And also, of course, school feeding programs like they have in France. They get wonderful healthy foods there. And okay, so you asked me about meat. Well, yeah, consuming. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. Can you hear me? I can't.
There you go, a little glitch. Sorry for that. No, exactly. I mean, meat is something to think about, given we consume quite a lot of it these days, and we get so used to consuming it. But I think moving on to the next questions, or kind of you already bridged to the next question, saying, talking about the 10 billion people, what can be done from bottom-up approach? And you mentioned the food stamps, and I could see that there might be other projects or ideas out there to support these goals to feed a healthy society in the future. Do you have any projects in mind, or any examples that you could think of?
Yeah, well, actually, you were speaking about making meat in a lab. Well, that's something that people are going about, but actually, there are many projects that can be done, but what people can personally do is, first of all, is change their eating habits. And this is very important, because although we know that the greenhouse gases, we're causing global warming, and these greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide, it's capturing the sunlight and then sending it back to the earth. It's warming up our planet, and we know that 60% is coming from carbon dioxide from heating the house and from.
Wait, I'll share the screen, because you've also got a good summary on this. 1 second, if that helps you. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so 14% of actually, so 14% of our global greenhouse gas comes from the livestock industry. Now, the thing is with these animals, ruminants, especially the cows, that they put out, instead of not carbon dioxide, they have through their digestive system methane, and methane is a more potent greenhouse gas by 25% than carbon dioxide. So actually, if you do 14.5% times 25, you'll have a much higher number than the whole industry that's putting up carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Now, not only that, carbon dioxide lasts for about between 20 and 1,000 years. So most people say it's about 100 years in the atmosphere. Methane, thank goodness, only lasts about 30 years. 20 to 30 years. So that's good news. So if we start making the change, we'll start seeing the change pretty soon. But the thing is that if you put together the effect of methane, you instead of 100 years, you put it down to the 20 or 30 years, you'll see that it's 70 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So really, now 2016 was the warmest year in recorded history. So the best approach is, first of all, changing our diets. And when we do that, it will really change. Maybe you can show the next slide. I sent you, that's the last slide, I think.
with the plant-based diet effects.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's see that.
In a second, yeah.
Also, there is something important is the different types of meat have different are different in sustainable choices. So wait, let's look at this. You see, so if everyone in the world followed a 90% plant-based diet, so my research into the ideal diet for humans shows that really 10% of the diet can come from animal products for health, and the rest should be plant-based. So if you go with a plant-based diet, eating legumes, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, nuts, and seeds, and just 10% coming from animals, so you have a savings in health costs, you know, $1 trillion and 8.1 million fewer deaths per year. That's even more than what we see from smoking. And if everyone followed a 90% plant-based diet, greenhouse gas emissions would be down 55%. So then we'd really be where we want to go. And also, I wanted to say that you can take down the thing, the PowerPoint. But if there are also different types of meat. So, for example, if a person would want to choose their meats in a sustainable way, then you have fish that are very efficient users of feed. For example, salmon research that was done that showed that 1.1 kilo of feed for these salmon produces 1 kilo of meat. And then you have chicken, which is also very efficient, but you have 1.7 kilos of feed producing 1 kilo of meat. And on the other hand, you have a pig, which is about 3 kilos of feed, produces 1 kilo of meat. But then you have a cow, which is about 7 kilo of feed, produces 1 kilo of meat. And also, 1 kilo of meat needs about the same amount of water that's needed for a whole household for 10 months. So this is very unsustainable choice of calories. And if we'd reduce the amount of calories, then we'd certainly have more agricultural land to feed. We'd have, today, 68% of our agricultural land is used for livestock. So this land could be restored and made grasslands or forests. And as we know that the plants take carbon dioxide and water, and with the sunlight, they make it into starches and oxygen. So they'd be capturing some of these greenhouse gases. So of course, we'd have more forests, and we'd have more biodiversity if we have more forests, and we could also diverge this land to feed more people. Now, there are some things, like I said, as far as the eye can see, actually people are moving more to cities. The more they move to cities, they are consuming much more dairy products, because dairy products are becoming so cheap because the government subsidize them, because the farmers there they're producing so much of this of dairy products, because they're in these factory farms where you have 500 plus animals, because it makes it more efficient to grow the animals, and they bring more yield. But the problem is that they make too much. They don't have pretty much anywhere to sell it to, so the price goes down, and they go into cities, they sell and then they want subsidies from the government. They say that, and rightly so, that the feed costs more than the milk is giving them, so they get subsidies from the government. And then you have the people moving to the cities, they're drinking so much and eating so much dairy products. So you see a rise in a graph like this of dairy product consumption when people move to cities. We have actually people eating more meat. So like you said, growing them in a lab, or we can also have, what I would suggest is having on top of the carbon tax that not very many politicians want to give it out, because I understand them. They're in office for a few years, and then they're not going to be able to see the effects, and people are mostly going to be angry with them. But if they give back the money, like a carbon tax, back to the people through income taxes and funding, that would be all right. And then also put a meat tax, meat and dairy tax. This is something that I think really should go in, because this is if you raise if you put on a tax on meat and even allow farmers to increase the price of this meat, then
there's a lot more awareness. If you buy something that's more expensive, then you
exactly, even not all meat, but beef, because it has the most effect through the methane. So you'd be charging more. People could still buy it. And they'd still be able to buy it. They just have to pay a higher price. So they won't use it as a staple food, but more rather as a treat.
An addition or as a treat, yeah.
Treat. And it should be done like this, because we know about all the harmful effects, not only on the environment, but also on our health. So the healthcare, bowel cancers, you have heart disease, all of these are from, especially the bowel cancer, from eating too much red meat with their endotoxins. So
interesting. Yeah, no, I think there is actually some new developments, which I'm not quite sure if I could trust. A non-dairy milk produced in the lab with absolutely no lactose and higher protein. Yeah. But in the end, it might be the best solution for especially us city people.
But then still you have the health issues. Yeah, definitely.
It might cause new health issues. We might just have to be aware and conscious and just as diverse in our eating habits as possible. Otherwise, we end up overproducing on that end again and causing more issues, right?
Actually, what could be done, what I was thinking, if you have this meat tax, then you can put it in. I know it's been done. It hasn't been done as a meat tax, but what I know is governments could put that money back into helping farmers transform their. I know in Switzerland, one farm he had livestock, and then he started to. With a oat making company, Oatly, he started to grow crops to produce this oat milk instead of only having it to feed his livestock. So that was helped through government help. So there are things to go about, and we can. I'm a vegan, so we don't really need to eat meat. I do it for. More for humanitarian purposes, but still I take vitamin supplements when I need. But people can eat the meat, the 10% meat, if they really and then pay a little bit more. And then it's also because actually, if you think about it, then we're subsidizing this meat by not, the governments are subsidizing this meat by not having us pay for what it really costs the world. So people that are selling the meat are earning this, and nobody's really paying for what it's costing the world.
Yeah, they're not pricing in what comes with it in terms of emissions and the things that you've shown quite effectively in your summaries as well.
Yeah, as well. I forgot. There's also a picture of the food pyramid. So if you could put that up.
1 second.
Actually, if we would subsidize, if governments like this is my food pyramid. So you see, this is on the one side, it's the USDA food pyramid plotted in a chart, and the other side is based on my research into the ideal diet for humans. So it's pretty much similar. You just see the differences. The dairy products are missing, and you have more legumes. But the other stuff is pretty much the same. And grains, of course, I should say that they're whole grains rather than the USDA says half of it should go for whole grains. But if you subsidize food, the USDA subsidizes food, then maybe they should subsidize it based on what they're saying. So you have this food pyramid, so subsidize it according to that. Now 5% is going to vegetables and fruits, whereas they form here in my pyramid about 20. You have 15% the fruits, and then the vegetables I think 20%, 23%, or I can't really see, it's small. But yeah, you put them together, then you have about 35%, and they're getting only 5%, whereas the dairy and meat industry is getting much more than the 23 plus 7, so you have this 30%. It's getting much more subsidies. So if you change the subsidies to go at least by the food pyramid, then it would be good. Yeah.
Okay. No, I mean, I think that's it's a good way to describe and where we could move, and that is actually not such a big shift as we would expect from, you know, the results or the issues we're seeing when we have 10 billion people in 2050. And if it means that we have to make some daily adjustments, I know we all know that habits are difficult to overcome, but I think that consciousness and awareness is key. And that's something I got, you know, it was one of my last questions for you, actually, in terms of how much we do need to shift our mindsets and adjust our worldview. And obviously that brings me back to, let me stop sharing so you actually see me talking as well. There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that brings me kind of to a summary of, and I found that really interesting, and my key takeaways for, you know, in terms of questions and how to adjust our mindsets and be aware about these facts, and the fact that you put them out there, and then the fact that we discussed them today, I think is crucial, and it's something that just needs to be engaged more in a lot of other contexts. So it needs to be little projects for younger people, or it needs to be, exactly, that's
also, there are lots of other things like vertical farming. That's something absolutely amazing. When I gave my TED Talk, there was another man giving a TED Talk on vertical farming. I think that's absolutely wonderful. Now they're using it for plants that are usually very pesticide intensive. So you grow foods indoors and with light, and if you can use natural light from sunlight or to power those lamps, then that's even wonderful. So you have people, they can the permaculture and food forest. And then we have now this also genetically engineered crops, which are you can't, what does it say here? That you're not, oh, okay. So the genetically engineered crops that are helping use less pesticides, but I see a major problem with that. And you know, pest resistance has been formed. Now there is a new BT put into crops, the Bacillus thuringiensis.
So yeah, is there? Do you see? I have a question here actually from Emma, and we're gonna just look quickly into what kind of other foods you would suggest could be accessible and nutritious. If you do look into crops, I mean, if we all go into more legumes or more crops, is there another alternative you would see? We've spoken about a lot of different things now. I think meat and dairy and crops, but
yeah,
something we haven't discovered yet, maybe, or not many of us have discovered, but you would know about.
Well, there are very promising practices that are used for land and water management. And one of them is crop rotation. So you could have grains grow and then legumes grow, and they put back the nitrogen into the ground. And it also, when you do that, it also brings increases the microbiome. It helps healthy bacteria to grow in the ground, making it more, you know, healthy ground. And plants, of course, if they're grown in healthy soil, then they're more immune to pests and more immune to all sorts of other environmental conditions like heat and water, less water. And also there are other farming practices like what is called agroforestry. You grow trees in the same plot of land, and it actually is known to increase yield by 50%. So then people can sell the stuff from the trees as well. So
Wow, okay. So there's a whole new ecosystem of things evolving that we could think
and
of.
water harvesting, maintaining the water, less irrigation. So there are lots of things that can be done instead of putting so much fertilizers. Also, making sure that you're adding the fertilizers, because the fertilizers they then run off into groundwater and into water bodies and cause fish to die there. They take up all the oxygen. They don't allow photosynthesis, the sun to shine through, and then bacteria grow, and they really choke the fish. So that's also a problem. I think that so fertilizers also less use, although we need them, because the fertilizers actually allow us to go from 4 billion to feeding 4 billion. With the use of fertilizers, we can now feed our current population, which we could not have done. So this is really an amazing thing what was with this.
It's a good point to make, because I wouldn't have considered that. Obviously, it's a bit like the Industrial Revolution, which got us somewhere, but needs to be adapting a little bit.
We need to adapt. Yeah, there is so many possibilities. Now is the time for so many entrepreneurs to make so much money from all these things, because really this is the way to go. And governments and companies, can work together. There's so much things that can be done.
And what do you think, from an individual perspective, can someone do to really be aware of these things? So it's another question that we've got here, that, I mean, if we want to start adjusting our lifestyle, if someone watches this now and thinks, okay, that's actually a couple of points I haven't been having time to consider yet, where do I start?
Okay, so first of all, reduce animal product consumption. That's number one. And then, of course, go for sustainable transport methods. We can have most of the greenhouse gas emissions are made from the developed countries. We have the United States, Europe, and now China. So we can start to drive smaller cars, electric cars. We can travel less. We don't need to make 3 holidays a year. We can do 1 holiday or
a local holiday. I mean, there's some nice
local holidays. Yeah, exactly. And we can change our lights to LED lamps in the house, and we can also produce less waste. Waste is a big issue, because also waste, landfills use up land. They also emit methane. So we can start also using recycled paper. Recycled paper is the 5th largest. Paper is the 5th largest industry that produces that uses up most of the energy. So what we can actually is use recycled paper. It also the production of recycled paper uses 65% less energy than manufacturing of paper from raw materials. Also, you'd have to chop down 17 trees to get 1 ton of recycled paper. So use recycled paper. Instead of paper towels, use real towels.
So just go around your house and check out a few products and things that you can either avoid or do differently.
Yeah, even toothbrushes, we're throwing them out. They're made out of plastic. We can
reuse them for cleaning. That's why I thought.
Yeah, exactly. We can also use these compost bamboo toothbrushes, which are
there's loads of new developments in that space, but I think food is a big part of our life, right?
So food is the biggest part.
We have to maybe thinking about that will not just help the planet, but also our long-term health and outlook. Also, after we get here to 6 billion people, we might just make it to 10 billion. Galit, I would wrap up the session. We've come to over 30 minutes, and it's been a pleasure talking to you. In case there are more questions, please post them on the website, still on your session page. Galit, you can still continue the conversation. We hope that it's, the more interactive. This is just a start today, so just please keep on posting, keep on asking and discussing. Again, thanks a lot, Galit. We have a couple more sessions coming up today. I hope you will also enjoy them, from Israel, and all viewers from Israel, as well as Europe and UK and US. And it's been a pleasure to be speaking at DIF Day 4 today, and enjoy the rest.
Thank
Bye,
you.
Galit. Bye-bye.
Bye.